Hi friends, this is Tony from Historic American Homes, and today we're going to work on the next part of our mid-century modern inspired small home design using Sketchup Pro and Layout. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the kitchen, the thought processes behind how the kitchen ended up the way it is. In the spirit of full disclosure, I'm letting you see my notes as I go through the topics that we're going to cover in this video. I just want to say for a start that there are loads and loads of topics related to kitchens, lots of detail, and I'm not going to try to cover everything here. This would be several hours long if I did. So I'm just going to touch on briefly on all the various issues you might want to consider, and then perhaps in the future I'll do some more detailed videos on various points. And also there are lots of good design resources available online for you to look into any of these more. That said, I'll say that I'd say that the starting point really is your size, the size of the kitchen, which is governed mostly by the budget and the cooking style. And when I talk about cooking style, maybe it's my background in engineering, but I tend to take an engineering approach of design for what you need. Don't spend resources on stuff you don't need, and don't spend a lot of money doing design that doesn't meet your needs. So size, you have to base that on how you like to cook. Do you make a dozen loaves of bread every weekend and give them to your friends, or do you pop something into the microwave when you come home from work? Uh, that's that's fundamental. You have to analyze that, your own lifestyle in that respect, and then you have to prioritize your budget uh, as you see fit to meet that. That's the functional attitude toward the kitchen. There is, of course, a social aspect to kitchens more so now than in the past. You might be able to describe it in three categories. The old paradigm, keep the mess behind closed doors, kitchen odors. The housewife magically floats through a door with into the dining room with a roast on a platter and everything. You never see the mess behind the closed doors. That's just not the way most people seem to function anymore. And so I'm not going to cover that approach to a kitchen in this video, or probably even in future videos. It has its place. It can be quite helpful when you're restoring a historic old house, but that's not going to be what we're looking at here. The opposite end of the spectrum is kitchen as grand central lobby, the main social space of the house, with a half dozen people wandering through it, carrying cocktails as they have their after work party. This is the kind of kitchen that drives a cook nuts, because you don't want people wandering through the space you're working in while you're cooking. It's also the kind of kitchen that will often be sold to you if you go to a kitchen showroom whose purpose is to sell you as many cabinets and expensive appliances as possible. Getting back to buying what you really need. The result can be a lot of money and a kitchen that has a lot of problems in terms of function. So in between those two, the old paradigm and the grand central lobby is what I think is what most people want and expect. And that is a kitchen that is separate but connected to the social spaces around it, so that the person in the kitchen can work efficiently and enjoy the work and not be isolated from everyone else. That is the way most kitchens I design are. That's the way I design most kitchens, and that's the way most people do it nowadays. I think we've got a good trend going on. The design element that's probably most pivotal in making that work is some form of island or peninsula, but also paying attention to circulation. So the peninsula or island is really where the kitchen meets the other social spaces. And if you can design the work zones of the kitchen, I'll get to work zones further along. If you can design the work zones of the kitchen so that they're uninterrupted by circulation, but connected via a peninsula or an island, then you've found the magic formula. As far as islands go, I'm just going to take a brief look at three pictures here I found online that I think are useful. Three types really: raised counter, standard counter, and tabletop. Here's a raised counter, and it has the advantage of visually shielding the sink area from the social space on the left, so you don't see the clutter if a little bit of dirty dishes gets left out. This is a nice arrangement. It has the advantage of shielding that clutter, which means like if you've got a more formal kind of dining room on the other side, but you still want a connection, you don't feel like you're eating in your kitchen, even though you're visually connected. The downside is that when you break up the counter surface, you lose a little bit of functionality. Having a larger smooth surface, a larger continuous surface is a good solution, is a very practical thing to have. We see that in this photo here where the counter is mid-height. You've got a nice big work area, very convenient, very adaptable. If you're having a big party, you can put all your stuff out here and treat it like a buffet. If it's just the family, you've got your stools here. I should mention you do need, for a standard 36-inch counter, you will be using stools rather than chairs, medium height stools. For the taller counter we looked at before, you're going to use tall stools. That's another consideration. Some people don't find stools all that comfortable. So looking at this last example, we see a combination of standard height and dining table height with, you can see the difference in the chairs and the stool heights. Now it is possible to use a dining table height countertop and have cabinetry underneath it. It's certainly very possible to design it that way and include storage and also, for example, sinks. However, if you do use a dining table height work surface, eating surface as a work surface as well, you will not be able to put standard under counter appliances such as an oven or a small refrigerator or wine cooler. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, that's three kitchen island types. The last point I'm going to make here right now is aging in place or universal design. If you're not familiar with those phrases, Google them and you will find lots of resources that will be very interesting. I think it's really important for people to think about when they're doing their design, whatever age they are, to think about whether they want to design for their own changing needs as they age, or even if they don't expect to be in the space for a long time, who's going to follow them there? Who's going to end up in there after them? Does it make sense to consider the body's changing needs as you age? Mobility changes, balance can become more difficult for some people, visual acuity, being able to see distinctly differences in height or a handle on a door, for example. So there's a website called aginginplace.org, aginginplace.org, that has lots of great articles all about, in detail, about all the things to consider. I believe that this website also covers wheelchair access. If not, again, if you just simply use a search engine to search universal design, you'll find great resources on how to adapt kitchens to those circumstances. I'm not going to go into that anymore here. Instead, what we'll look at next are some examples of small, large, and mid-size kitchens. This here is a yacht building website, company called Azimut Yachts, AZIMUT yachts.com. And this particular yacht has a nice example of a very compact kitchen in a linear format. On the bottom of the screen, we see the galley plan. We've got a sitting area centered around a coffee table, which can actually be raised up to the height of close to the height of a normal dining table. So it serves both functions. Another sitting area across. And then the kitchen itself is linear. I don't know the scale exactly, but I'm guessing it's probably about between 7 and 8 feet all the way across. Here's a few pictures of here's a picture of the the sitting area with the table in the low position. This table can be raised up about 6 inches, which makes it functional for dining. It's not ideal, but it works. The kitchen is up at the upper level. We have cold storage on the left. These hinges indicate that it's a cold storage container. So you got your refrigerator. Maybe that's a refrigerator and a freezer below. Oven, cooktop, a little difficult to see, but there's a sink over here. And then there seems to be some additional storage down at the end. That's, let's see, I think there's one or two more pictures here. Yeah, there you go. There's another. You know, that's a linear arrangement that's really suitable for something like a boat or a land yacht, like an Airstream, or of course a tiny house. If one was doing a tiny house, I think there would be a lot to learn from boat design. I'll probably be working on a few tiny houses in the next couple of months, so I will come back to that. I want to look at one more small example. This is an Airstream that was remodeled. This is from dwell.com. Dwell is a great design magazine that I highly recommend, so check out their website, dwell.com. And here again we see we've got built-in seating around two sides, and then the kitchen in a linear arrangement on the left with a bit of storage up above. We've got a few pictures of this, so I'll just click through them. There you can see the whole setup. We've got some storage on either side of the cooktop, which is a good arrangement because it allows for a bit of counter on both sides. That's a safety feature I feel is really important. It shouldn't be sacrificed. You need to have at least a bit of counter on both sides of your cooktop. If there's an emergency and you need to pull something off the cooktop, you need to be able to pull it in either direction without reaching over the cooktop. And then the refrigerator is off to the left. Let's see if we have a picture of that. Yeah, so down here you see the refrigerator at the end. This is a really beautiful remodel of Airstream that they completely took apart the inside, or maybe it was already in bad shape, so they just gutted it and completely rearranged the interior, made a really excellent design out of it. And again, if I was working on a tiny house, it would be inspiration. We looked at a kitchen on a yacht and we looked at a kitchen on a motorhome. In both cases, they had the entire setup along one wall, which is a very practical arrangement for a tight space, a narrow space or a small footprint. It's something that works really well for a tiny house in a lot of cases. And I'm actually working on a couple of tiny house designs that I'm going to put out to the public in a couple of months. So I'm just starting to work on some kitchen ideas for them, and I've got two here. There's the linear approach, which is what we saw before on the boat, which just simply lines everything up against one wall. It's very cost effective, it's efficient with space. In this case, I'm probably going to be developing a bathroom to fit behind it so that the plumbing is in the shared wall, and the whole thing will become a kind of a divider between a sleeping area and a sitting area. The linear approach works well, but sort of the classic kitchen layout is organized around the work triangle. This is probably something you've heard about. It's commonly organizes the space of a kitchen based on a triangle with the 3 points at the refrigerator, the sink, and the stove. So I'm also working on another tiny house version, which is where the kitchen is going to be in a kind of alcove with a loft space over it. This is a footprint of just under 8 feet by 8 feet. Two big sheets of plywood, a large walk-in closet. That's the size of this space here. And in this case, the work triangle approach makes a lot of sense rather than this linear arrangement. Sometimes this is called a galley kitchen when you've got two sides facing each other. Important to note that in some galley kitchens, you'll have it open at both ends, a door opening at each end. And in my experience, most people who live with that find it very inconvenient because the kitchen becomes a corridor and it's really hard to work in. So people I've known have always complained that they don't like galley kitchens, which is fine, but it's important to differentiate that the same arrangement inside of an alcove where you can't walk through can work really well. So those are two small kitchens, and we're going to take a quick peek at a large one that's a variation on the work triangle and something that I think is worth considering for larger projects, which is this kitchen here. This is actually a kitchen I designed many years ago, and I had to recreate from memory. I did that this morning. What we have is the main kitchen space. There's a family room to one side, a dining room, formal dining room to the other side, and a breakfast area. And then there's a lot of other spaces on the house that are not relevant. But the kitchen is meant to serve all three of those spaces. And this particular cook, who enjoys spending a lot of time in her kitchen, wanted a kitchen that actually had two completely functionally separate work zones. So this is a variation on the idea of the work triangle, where we actually have two separate work triangles that don't overlap. They touch, but they don't overlap. And that means that it's possible for several people to work in this kitchen at the same time. So we can start by looking at one triangle. Here's the refrigerator to stove, and then this is a small prep sink for washing vegetables and things, not for doing dishes. So you have a triangle here, which is great for preparing food. Stuff comes out of the fridge, it gets washed, it gets prepped, it gets cooked. The other triangle is the main sink. Let's zoom around here. We have the sink, the dishwasher, and the refrigerator. So all of the dishes and things were cleanup, dishes coming from the breakfast area, dishes coming from the dining room, all of the cleanup happens on this side, separate from the food prep. So what we've done is, by virtue of having two sinks, one for preparing food and one for dishes, we've been able to separate the before the meal and the after the meal activities. And then one last little fine tuning here. We pull the oven off to the side and made a little coffee corner. So food that goes in the oven, basically once it's in the oven, it's out of the system, it's out of the work area. So having the oven off to the side of the work triangle is perfectly practical solution. And then we took advantage of that corner to serve as a little coffee corner. So we have the coffee maker here and some mugs and your tea bags and everything up here. So somebody in the family room decides they want a cup of coffee, they can come over here, do their thing, and go back to the family room, and they don't really have to get involved in what's going on in the main space. So that was organization for a larger, more complicated kitchen with a more complicated workflow. I'll mention a few things here about storage too. It's really important to plan your storage where you want to use things. So in this case, for example, in the cooking zone, well, for a start, the woman whose kitchen this is, she is very short, and she wanted to have a work area with a lowered counter surface. So we created a section of counter that was 4 inches lower than standard, and that's got a butcher block countertop. And so she does baking and preparing all of her food in this lower area at a more convenient height. However, since we still needed to have a full-size oven, we bumped back up to the standard height again, because we would not have been able to fit a proper full-size oven underneath this lower counter. So this is the main cooking area, and as far as storage, we have these drawers. Some of them are deeper, and these can accommodate all the pots and pans. We've got spices in this drawer here. We've got more spices and canned foods up here. We have additional storage on this side of this island here, which is things that are used in the breakfast area. On this side of the island, next to the dishwasher, is where the everyday china and silverware go after they've been cleaned. After people are having breakfast, everything goes onto the countertop. It ends up in the dishwasher. From the dishwasher, it goes right into here. Silverware, cups, bowls, all conveniently located next to the dishwasher. So things are being stored near where they're used. And then finally, we have a little butler's pantry kind of arrangement between the kitchen and the dining room. So we have this little space that you walk through, and we've got some additional storage there. They keep like party related stuff in this area, wine glasses, candelabra for the table, things like that. And then in the dining room itself, we took advantage of the layout to put in a built-in buffet, and then they had a painting that goes in the gap here. Let's look at a couple of mid-sized kitchens, and then we'll move on to our favorite project. So this is a design that I'm very nearly completing, and will be putting on my house plans website in the next 2 months, I hope. And what I'm going to show you here are my struggles to find a suitable kitchen arrangement for the space that I had. To give you a rough idea, there's an entrance and a lobby space on one side, and then I envision this as being a dining, kind of kitchen dining family space. And then this is to be either a patio door to an outside terrace, or with some different options that are going to be available, this would lead into a kind of a greenhouse that leads to the garage. So it could be some spillover social space. So my first goal was to try to have light coming from two sides. I figured it would be a patio door on one side and a window in the wall. So my first impulse was to do the usual, put the sink under the window, and then just make a simple U arrangement. It was okay, but having it kind of wide open to the dining area means that everything is sort of out to be seen. I don't know, it just wasn't quite happening. It was acceptable, but it doesn't have a lot of storage, and with the corners, both the corners used up, corners are always a little difficult to take full advantage of, so I put some Lazy Susan type cabinets in the corners. But basically it was just sort of like adequate, but I thought I could probably come up with something better. So I tried an arrangement where I sacrificed the window on the back and instead added a window on the same side, which was a compromise because I'd rather have the light coming in from two different directions. You generally get a nicer indoor light quality that way, natural light. But it did begin to divide the space a little better between the kitchen and the sitting area, the dining area. And then I went on from there and flipped it around to see if I could still make some improvements. I was able to get some windows back in, but at the sacrifice of wall cabinets. And it was getting quite awkward in the corner having these ovens next to this refrigerator, and then it was all sort of tight up in the corner here. Just basically wasn't happening. Anyway, the long and the short of it was I finally found a solution, which is now resolved and in the model. So it was something along the lines of one of those where I had the peninsula coming out, but I've been able to restore the window to the sidewall, which is what I wanted. And you can see in the end it kind of looks like it was supposed to be that way. It's one of those obvious looking results that you have to get to in a roundabout manner. I pulled the ovens off to one side so that they're not right in the main workspace. Oh, by the way, there's the work triangle we were talking about. Having the ovens pulled off to one side means I can devote the space near the work triangle to storage for things being used in the work triangle. And then I gave it a nice deep island with storage on the back side of the island. These cabinets could be taken out and this could be used as a dining counter, but I figured with this being a relatively small room and having a dining table right here, there'd be no point in the redundant dining counter, so I decided it would be better to devote that space to some extra storage. So that was the result of that exercise. Now let's go back and look at another one, similar scale, but of a somewhat different character. This is going to be part of a great room, measuring about 17 feet by 40 feet, slightly under that by a few inches. There'd be an entrance area, an entryway with some storage, a coat closet and so forth, and then a kitchen next to that facing the front of the house, and then there'd be dining and sitting room along the back. This was actually the first arrangement I came up with. So coming in the entrance here, there would be coat closets, then the wall would make this jog, and tucked around on the other side would be pantry cabinets and a refrigerator. So it becomes a kind of a space divider that's not full height. It's only about 7 feet high, whereas the ceiling is 9 feet high. So it's not dividing the room into separate rooms, but just serving as a kind of a divider of a space divider within a larger room. I had a window facing the street, put the sink under the window, and wrapped the countertop around, cooking to the side. And as I worked on that, I decided I didn't like seeing straight in from the social space. I thought it needed some division, some visual break. So I came around to this combination, which includes the refrigerator, some storage and ovens, all of the tall stuff, all of the tall cabinetry on one side. It allowed me to keep a window facing the street. And then on the sidewall, I was able to get a window over the sink, which is always a nice feature. Definitely not something that is 100% necessary. People seem to think you have to. You don't. People spend less and less time in front of their kitchen sinks. Everything ends up in the dishwasher. So if you're finding you're compromising other things you want in order to get that window over the sink, think closely about whether you really need it and how much time do you actually spend at the sink. Anyway, I ended up with this result, which I was very happy with. So I will show it to you in the final model here. We see the great room. It measures about 17 by 40. At the left, we have the entrance facing the street. The left side is facing the street. Come into a little lobby space. There's coat closet, broom closet alongside the entrance. And then bringing your groceries home, you can just nip around the corner and you're in the kitchen. We have a dining area and sitting area. The kitchen counter is working as a, hang on a moment. Kitchen counter is working as doing extra work as a bar. So I've got no storage facing out. I do have one tucked in the corner here. Again, I have a corner. So instead of putting a usual corner cabinet on this side, I just use regular cabinets up to the corner. And then I flipped the one around, the cabinet that would have been in the corner. I flipped it around so you can get to it from this side. So it'll be for some things that you don't use all that much, you know, your Christmas lights or pads and pencils for taking notes, whatever. Anyway, I basically satisfied with the results of that kitchen. I think it works well within the space. It keeps the openness of the space without being completely wide open to the living area. So let's go back to our house that we're working on and see how those things I discussed play into how this kitchen ended up arranged. I will simply talk through the thought process I used as I worked on the layout. We'll start by turning the roof off so we can see in. The basic concept of the house is that there's one large central space with a bedroom suite on either side. The north side, which is at the top of the screen, is the entrance side facing the street, and the south side faces into a garden, so the main social rooms and bedroom space towards the garden. All of these walls and doors and everything are still very much underway, but I wanted to make sure before completing all that, putting a lot of time into it, I wanted to make sure I had enough space and a suitable arrangement for layout for the kitchen and for the bathrooms, because this is the time to make the dimension adjustments if I need them. If I spend a lot of time working on a shell, getting it all worked out, getting all the dimensions in there and everything fixed, and then discover that I really need another few inches here or there in order to make a more workable kitchen, it's a lot of rework. So like to kind of move the various parts together in parallel, checking each against the other that way. So what we have is an entrance from the street front, a coat cupboard, a broom closet, and then in the space in between I have put a panel using the same material as the cabinetry so that it looks like it's a part of the cabinetry. But in fact, there is a 2x4 framed wall inside there, and a couple of reasons for this. One is that it provides a place to run conduit, electrical wires, so forth. The refrigerator's on this side of that block, and having that wall in there also provides stability, structural stability, so that the tall cabinets have something to attach to. The refrigerator has electrical outlet or plumbing if this ends up being a refrigerator that has a water supply to it. So that's a principle to keep in mind. You don't really want your cabinets freestanding, even when there's an island, even if it's just an island and they're low. You need to have some walls in there. Let me turn the cabinets off for a moment, and you can see the island here. That 2x4 framed wall continues all the way along and wraps around so that it frames the end as well and provides some stability, some lateral stability to the whole structure of cabinetry. Now, looking at the overall arrangement, I wanted to make sure to keep circulation out of the kitchen. So it compromises that from the entrance you have to walk around to get into the kitchen to put your bags of groceries down. There will be a door round about here leading into this bedroom suite, but it skirts the edges. It doesn't go into the kitchen space. I knew that I wanted to have a very simple kind of minimalist look in this kitchen, so I kept the countertop I kept the bar area to a single surface, and I was aiming for a very regular rhythm of cabinetry. We have the work triangle we talked about before. I've staggered elements so that, for instance, the sink and the stove are not directly facing each other. At one stage I had the stove here and they were back to back, and that's not a good arrangement. You want to keep things separated laterally as well as having your triangle. The reason is that you don't want to have, for instance, the oven door down and you're standing it and you've got tight space working at the sink. Now, given that there are some space constraints, I got the dishwasher next to the sink, so if the dishwasher's open and the oven is open, yeah, you start to get a little problem, but there's always small compromises when the space is constrained. Anyhow, upon further consideration of this plan, which I'm basically happy with, I'm thinking that I may end up taking the oven out and using a cooktop and replacing one end or the other with a 30-inch wide pantry height tall cabinet and putting the oven into the tall cabinet. I'm going to play around with that idea a little more. The reason is that these are all 2-foot cabinets, 2-foot wide cabinets all the way across, with a 30-inch space for the cooktop and oven. But I've got some space left over here, and I think that it would be a good way to take advantage of it. Then I would have an arrangement of a fully symmetrical arrangement of 2 cabinets on each side of the cooktop. So either the whole thing moves over and this comes out, everything moves over, and I put a pantry cabinet at this end with the ovens in it, or I put the pantry cabinet at that end. I'm going to play with those ideas a little more, and the next time we look back in this model, you'll see the final results. Anyway, the keys are, I got my work triangle, I've got storage near where I need it, so dishwasher, these drawers can accommodate plates and silverware, so can these drawers. They're both easily accessible from the dishwasher when things are going from the dishwasher to where they're being used, to where they're being kept. On this side, we've got plenty of storage with deep drawers around the stove, pots and pans, spice racks, everything. Kitchen over at this end, this would probably be devoted to dry food storage. Let me turn the roof back on and let's go inside the space. You can see how it's going to look from inside as the space develops a little more. We have the divider, we have the divider between the entry and the kitchen with the coat closet and broom closet. And then we have And then we have the main part of the kitchen itself with all of the windows above. Having the sink on the island allows the person working at the sink to look out. The hood can vent directly out the back through the wall, so that means there will be a vent visible on the front wall of the house, but with some careful detailing that can be minimized. You should have plenty of good indirect lighting coming in through those windows up above. And then we have the windows behind us facing south, bringing in yet more light. They will have proper shading designed so that we don't get flooded with too much direct sunlight. Overall, I'm happy with the way it's coming out. I think the thought processes that went into it might be useful when you're designing your own, designing and laying out your own kitchens. Next time we come back to the model, we'll move on to the master bedroom, master bathroom area. Before you go, I hope you'll take a moment to like and subscribe. Click that bell and get notifications for when the next video comes out. I'm sure there's lots of questions and lots of comments about kitchens, so please leave your comments below and I will attempt to cover more in more detail any question you might have about kitchens. I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day. Bye.